If you could only take one lens, is 40 millimeters the magic sweet spot of all lenses? And look how tiny it is. This is full frame. The two most used lenses I've ever used through all these years are, as you know, the 55 1.8 and the 35 1.4. And of course, I'm talking full frame here, not APS-C or micro four thirds. So when I'm on location like this, I'm always switching between these two. And when I do, of course, dust and sand can get into the camera and the lenses, and that's a real hassle. But you have to keep switching, and it's just a real hassle. Plus, you have the size and the weight issue of two different lenses like this. What if you could just have one lens that could replace these two? Now, the 35 is this one here, the 1.4, awesome. It's a cinematic lens. It's really great, but it's kind of heavy and it's kind of big. The 55 is the perfect size. It's like an APS-C lens, but the two of them together make a clunky situation. So the midpoint between 35 and 50 to 55 is 40 to 45. So if I could have a 40 to 45 lens that could replace these two, theoretically, that would be perfect. The 35 is sometimes a little too wide, and the 55 or the 50 is sometimes a little too narrow. So I think maybe the 40 to 45 could be the magic sweet spot if you could only have one lens. So I have assembled for your viewing pleasure today exactly that. I've got 145, the rest are all 40s, and we're going to compare these today to see if this is the perfect one lens that you could take with you that does kind of wide angle and kind of narrow, and it just fits all these beautiful situations. Now, the thing about most 40 millimeter lenses is they do not go under f2.5. And for those of you who think that 2.5 is not blurry enough, stick around. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised today. Okay, here are the lenses. First, the normal ones. Here's the big 35 1.4 top-of-the-line cinematic master lens. If you're in a beautiful location, you do not want more background blur than this. Otherwise, why be in a beautiful location? Here's a more reasonable 35. It's a 1.8, the same size as the 55 1.8. These two make a great travel pair. 1.8 is an awesome stop. I think this is the perfect amount of background blur for location shots. The 35 is 800 and the 55 is 1000. And bam, here's my favorite 55 1.8. You can see right away why this is my favorite lens. For me, this is the perfect portrait lens. Look how the foreground stands out against the background, and look how blurry a 1.8 is. You can see why this is my most used lens of all my lenses. But you can also see how much tighter the framing is. Here's the 35 1.8, and here's the 55 1.8. What we want today is to be right between these two. Okay, here are the 40 millimeter lenses. Sony has a 40 millimeter 2.5G lens at $750. It's professional, it's sharp, it's really small, but it's f2.5 worth $750. For the same price, you can get a Voigtlander Nocton 40 millimeter f1.2, a super sharp German-made ultra awesome professional enthusiast lens. If you want blurry backgrounds, here you go. If you didn't know any better, you'd say this was a telephoto shot. So you get the look of a telephoto, but with the field of view of a wide angle. See what I mean? This is the magic sweet spot between all lenses. The only thing is, it's manual focus. I did a video a while ago doing a photo shoot with nothing but this lens, and the photos were amazing. I seriously think if they made an autofocus 40 millimeter f1.2, this might be the most popular lens in the world. Are you listening, Sony? Or even Viltrox? Sigma does have a 40 millimeter 1.4 and a 28 to 45 1.8, but they are huge, heavy monsters and not fun to carry around. If Voigtlander can make a 40 millimeter 1.2 this small, why can't they make an autofocus version that's just a little bit bigger? I know what you're saying, it's too expensive and I want autofocus. Okay, then for you, my friends, for 1/4 the price of the Sony or the Voigtlander, I have the Viltrox 40 millimeter f2.5, impressively sharp, super lightweight, and are you sitting down? It's only $168, and I know you're saying, but it's only f2.5. Then okay, then here's the Rokinon / Samyang 45 1.8, $300, extremely lightweight, only 162 grams. And I know a number of you are getting excited here because of the blur, and I think a number of people will be happy enough with this lens. But here it is next to the Viltrox, and even the Sony 55. Something about the Rokinon Samyang image still feels a little bit less expensive. It's not as crisp. But hey, it's cheaper, it's super lightweight, and many people will think that's good enough. You're probably saying, but $300 is still too much. Okay then, geez. Then for you cheapskates cheapskates, for half the price of that, we have the TT Artisan 40mm f2, $168. Not bad. Here it is next to the $168 Viltrox. The TT Artisan's a little bit softer, a little less contrast, but it's small, it's cheap, and it's good enough for probably most people. Definitely better than a GoPro or a 1-inch action cam. And for those of you who basically want stuff for free, here's the 7 Artisan's 40mm f2.5. It's so cheap and plasticky, it's only 90 grams. That's just over 3 ounces. Your SD card weighs more than this. If you just want to play around, here you go. Now, I think some of you are seeing this and saying, I don't see anything wrong with this whatsoever, and I don't blame you. So let's compare this with another lens that nobody else seems to take seriously, the Sony 28-60 kit lens. Ready? Bam! Look how sharp that kit lens is. You don't realize how soft the 7 Artisans or the TT Artisan is until you compare it with brand name lens. I did a video a while ago on the 28-60 kit lens in Death Valley, and even though it was around f5, the background was still softened up a bit and the shots look great. You don't want to blur out that beautiful scenery when you're in places like this. Look at these. These were taken with a kit lens between f4 and f5. I love these pictures. Okay, let's have some fun with these lenses and see what they look like in a real-world situation, if you can call this the real world. I'm going to do wide, medium, and close shots with each lens in several locations, and if YouTube doesn't compress the video too much, a trained eye should see the differences. I'm using an A7R5, and for comparison, we're going to start with my 3 usual lenses, starting with the 55 1.8. I just love the look this lens gives me, nice soft background and crisp foreground. And it's small like an APS-C lens. Look how the background starts falling away almost right away. This lens makes me feel so good. Look at the background separation. I always said if I could only have one lens ever, it would be this one. The look is perfect. My second most used lens of all time is this one, the 35 1.4. It's kind of big and heavy, but you can see why I like it so much. No other autofocus lens gives me this field of view, this depth of field, and this much foreground sharpness. The images look 3D. I really hold back from using the word cinematic, but this lens deserves that word. I just wanted to show you some sample images real quick so you can see why these are my 2 most used full-frame lenses. Okay, but the 35 1.4 is kind of big and heavy, so here's the 35 1.8, which is considerably smaller and lighter. It's the exact same size as the 55 1.8. It's also nice and sharp, professional Sony quality, great colors, very clean looking. The background's a little less blurry than the 1.4, but you definitely still get separation to the point where it almost looks fake. The foreground really stands out, even at 1.8. Okay, so these are the normal lenses we're up against. Here we go with the 40s, starting with the ultimate, the Voigtlander 40mm 1.2. Wow. You definitely get background separation. Totally 3D looking. Again, it almost looks like a telephoto shot, but with a wide-angle field of view, which seems almost impossible, but yet here we are. And you definitely don't need more blur than that. If they only made an autofocus version of this lens, I think it would be the most popular lens in the world. So, speaking of autofocus, here are the autofocus 40mm lenses, starting with the official Sony 40mm 2.5. It's a tiny lens, I would say almost micro four thirds size, but it's full frame, it's super sharp, and it's very clean looking. This lens focuses more on crisp, clear, professional images more than blurry backgrounds. Although you still get a bit of that, so you get some tasteful, subtle separation. Here's the Viltrox 42.5, same specs as the Sony, just a lot cheaper. It's also quite sharp, a tad less than the Sony, and the colors, they lean a little towards the green more than the Sony. But if you don't have anything to compare it to, people would still like this. I think the Sony looks cleaner, sharper, and has better colors, but it's 4 times the price of the Viltrox. For those who want a bit more background blur, there's the Rokinon Samyang 45 1.8. Most people's immediate reaction is, wow, this looks great. Until they compare it with other lenses and realize it's really not that sharp, and it's a little bit more washed out and not quite as punchy. It looks great, the background has that 1.8 blur, but you just feel like something's missing. You just can't put your finger on it. But I think a lot of people will go for this lens anyway because it does have that initial wow factor. Now, all the way down to $168, we have the inexpensive TT Artisan 40 f2, which is almost 1.8. Right away, you can see it's a little more on the green side. It looks a little more washed out. It's not as super sharp like the Sony lenses. But if you correct the color, you can get what some people might think is a nice image because of the f2 background. I like these pictures, but not because of the lens. I think this is a good example that subject matter, lighting, composition, and framing can still make an image interesting despite a cheap lens. Speaking of cheap lenses, here's the cheapest, the 7 Artisans 40mm 2.5. It's tiny, it's cheap plastic, it weighs nothing, and it's only $159, but I actually like this one better than the TT Artisan. The colors are warmer, the sharpness is still acceptable, background blur is pretty good for a 2.5, and I like the look a lot more than the TT Artisan. This one was a complete surprise to me. When I took it out of the box, I thought, this can't be a serious lens. How can this possibly take good pictures? But it does. I'm really surprised. It's a toy, but it's a fun toy. Now I'm going to throw in the Sony 28-60 f4 to 5.6 kit lens because it's also a 40mm technically, but it can also go wide to a 28 and more telephoto to a 60, which for me is the perfect portrait range, especially when traveling light and you want to have a small lens and be ready for anything. Sure, the background has very little blur, but it's super sharp and the images look so clean. It's like a breath of fresh air looking at these images, and it makes you feel like you're right there with the person. Okay, let's switch locations and outfits, and let's see if you can start to see a pattern with all these lenses like I just described. Here's my favorite 55 1.8, wide and close. Look at that background. My favorite lens ever. Here's my big heavy 35 1.4, wide, nice and sharp. Well, it better be for $1,200. Great background blur. You can see why it's my second most used lens. Here's the smaller, lighter 35 1.8, wide, a tiny bit softer, and close. Still has nice separation at 1.8. All right, here's the Voigtlander 1.2. Perfect separation, even with a wide shot, and of course, amazing up close. If only it was autofocus, grrr. Now look how sharp this one is. This is the Sony 40mm 2.5. Nice and crisp. And you still get a nice soft background, even at 2.5 with a medium shot like this. I think this is the perfect balance of sharpness and tasteful background blur for portraits in a beautiful location. Here's the Rokinon Samyang 45 1.8, not quite as sharp. I think for wide shots, it's nothing really to write home about. Here's the Viltrox, a little more punchy than the Rokinon under the right conditions. Here's the TT Artisan, it's okay, but it's not very sharp. Here's the 7 Artisans. See how much more it pops than the TT Artisan? And the close-up stands out more too. And here's the 28-60 kit lens, nice and sharp. I don't know, it's like a breath of fresh air. Looking at these just makes me feel so good. Real quick, third location, I'm just going to pick a few of my favorites here. Here's the Sony 40mm 2.5, sharp, crisp, clean, professional. Here's the 7 Artisans 40mm 2.5. Looks like you get a little more background separation than the Sony, and at $159, it's 5 times cheaper than the Sony. Here's the Rokinon 45 with a little bit more background separation because of the 1.8, but it's not as sharp. Again, lighting, composition, and subject matter is what makes these pictures interesting, even though it's not that sharp. And here's the Voigtlander. So, which ones of these do I like the best? Well, a 40 or 45 would be my one lens choice if they actually made an autofocus 1.2 or even 1.4, but they don't. So for now, the 55 1.8 is still my all-time favorite go-to if I had to choose only one lens. Nothing ticks off all the marks like this lens. And the 35 1.4 is still my go-to for once-in-a-lifetime locations with no second-chance pictures. But as far as having only one lens that falls between 35 and 50 to 55, it would be the Voigtlander if it was autofocus, but it's not. The Sony 40mm 2.5 is nice and sharp, but it just doesn't have the wow of the 55 1.8 or the 35 1.4. But it's perfect for street photography. It's really sharp, it's really small, and it's super high quality. The Rokinon pictures look like they were taken with a cheap APS-C lens, even though it's full frame, so no. Viltrox makes great lenses, but I don't think their 40mm 2.5 is anything to write home about. So the two lenses I personally enjoy the most are not the ones you'd expect. The cheap little plastic 7 Artisans just gives me giggles. I can't get over how much fun this is to play with. It's so lightweight and tiny. It's like having a micro four-thirds lens on a full frame camera, and look at the these pictures. Look at this. This is actually a pretty good lens. I think anyone with an A7C would love this little thing, and look at the background separation. It's great for creating memories when you're not on a serious photo shoot. What a fun little lens. But out of all the autofocus 40mm, the one that I feel the most relaxed using, I don't know, maybe it's because I've been around the world enough times and taken a million blurry background pictures, but I really like the 28-60 kit lens. You still get a little bit of background blur, just enough for some separation, but it's surprisingly sharp, it's small, it's very lightweight, it's fun to use, and no one will give you weird looks because it looks like a cheap tourist lens. But boy, can it take great pictures. When you see these shots, do you really care how blurry the background is? I actually think this is just the right amount of background softness here. This could be a professional photo shoot. Look at these. Again, the lighting and the subject matter are so important. And a sharp lens really helps too. If you're in memorable locations, you don't want to blur the hell out of the background. When I look at pictures taken with this lens, because I can see the background, it feels like I'm there, and I relive those magical moments every time. There's an honesty you get with these pictures you don't get with blurry background pictures. So I'm going to give away the Rokinon 45 1.8, the Viltrox 40 2.5, and the TT Artisan 40 f2 at marcuspix.giveawayenter.com. And oh yeah, by the way, the winner of the Sealands FL240 light stand is Eric Falla of Dumfries, Virginia. Congratulations. And by the way, the one light that I use to take all these flash pictures is the new Neewer Q120, which I will talk about in the next video. So, I hope you had a good time with this. We like to take you to fun, exotic locations and show you beautiful stuff to inspire you to put beauty in your life. Alright, well, hope you got something out of it. Well, maybe you'll run out and get one of these things. I'll see you in the next video. Hope you have a good one. Bye.